Hello, welcome to Illuminate, Research on Teaching and Learning. We're talking about the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education here at the University of Lethbridge. Hi, I'm Jan Newberry. I'm a professor of anthropology. I've been a Board of Governors teaching chair, and I've won the Distinguished Teaching Award here at the University of Lethbridge.
Hello, I'm Shelley Wismath. I'm a professor of mathematics and liberal education at the University of Lethbridge, and I currently serve as the Dean of the School of Liberal Education. I've won a Distinguished Teaching Award at the university and served as a Board of Governors teaching chair. And last year I was awarded a National 3M Teaching Award.
So this is a real pleasure to talk to Dean Shelley Wismath about the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, because I take part in and am involved in the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning because of Shelley. Early on, I didn't want to do this. In fact, I think I said to the head of the teaching center, "What is this SoTL? I don't even understand what that is." And so it was actually through Shelley's prompting and urging that I started to consider SoTL research. So I thought it might be interesting if you'd talk a little bit about SoTL research and what you've told me about it.
Well, I think most professors spend their graduate study training in research, right? And that's what we're experts in. And then when we get faculty jobs as professors, we actually end up spending probably half of our time on teaching. And we are usually not experts in that if we know anything at all. So SoTL, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, is an area of research that's emerged since about 1990 that deals with how best to teach and how students learn at the university level in higher education. We know that faculties of education train teachers in the K-12 system, and many of us assume that that's where all the research is, and we haven't in the past paid enough attention, I think, to both teaching and learning in higher education. So some of the early researchers in this area in the 1990s particularly talked about a shift from training people to teach to focusing more on learning. Mm-hmm. And that kind of set off, I think, not only this research area, but a big shift in how we look at post-secondary education.
I think most of us know about that history. That's wonderful to hear that. You said something to me early on when I was sort of dragging my feet, because as you said, I had my own research, but I wanted to be a good and effective teacher, and I hadn't really thought about taking that seriously as a research track. And you told me about the sort of the typical evolution in someone entering SoTL research. Can you say something about that?
Yes, there are definitely stages, I think, in the research, both in the types of research that gets done, but also in how faculty members approach it. And for many people, it's an outgrowth, I think, again, of their research experience. I would go regularly and talk with Doug and describe what was going on in the class and how scary it was and how I was trying to navigate all these new things. And he said, "Oh, you should be writing all this down and keeping notes, and this is really fascinating." And it was about that reflective process of my learning as I was teaching. It was the scariest thing I've ever done because, you know, math courses are so linear. And every week, that first course offering, I would take all my notes home and I would rearrange them in a new format, in new binders. And I finally, after week 5, realized, okay, this is totally nonlinear. You are never going to arrange them in a linear form, just give up. So Doug encouraged me to write a short piece about the transition in my own teaching, how difficult it was for a type A, compulsive, control freak, linear, mathematical person to totally give up control in the classroom. The next stage then was we collected some data. So we put together a survey, of about 50 questions. And quite honestly, I'd never made a survey before. I knew nothing about making a survey. We just threw in everything but the kitchen sink that we thought might be remotely connected to problem solving. And we gave the students the survey at the start of the course and again at the end of the course, and we did a comparison. And so we had some data, and we wrote it up, and there were a few interesting things. The second year, we realized that half our questions were really pointless and had nothing to do with anything, so we whittled it down. And we also realized, oh, there were really important things we didn't put in there. So revise, redo. And the second and subsequent years, we got much better data. The first year, the quantitative, the survey data, and the qualitative data we collected from students was enough to say, yeah, the course seems to be doing something. We think it's doing well, and the students liked it. So it was the beginnings of data. It was pretty rough looking back. At the time, I thought, wow, this is cool. I'm a SoTL researcher.
Look what we've done.
But in fact, I was, early in that sort of continuum of research. But it was a start. And the second year, as I said, we refined the issues that seemed to be emerging. We put in specific questions. We did a deeper analysis, I think. And we began in the second year and the third year, so the course has been offered about 6 times now. And for the first 5 years, we collected this standard data every year. And we began to see very consistent patterns. So this is another step along the way, the evolution from I tried something once, it worked, to I've got a bit of data that supports my gut feeling that it worked, to we have a long-term, both quantitative and qualitative and observational study of what's going on. Yeah, it became much richer and deeper. I think the kinds of questions we were asking, the observations we were doing, and the results we were getting became much richer and deeper. And so there's a couple of papers that came out of that I'm really proud of, pleased with in terms of they went beyond the beginning SoTL stuff to, I think, some really interesting research.
Which is wonderful. We talked about whether we should, connect this to liberal education in this conversation, and I just think, as I listen to you, that there's a couple of things to note. First of all, the problem-solving class was about a liberal education approach.
Yes, very much so.
And then secondly, your own struggles to shift from a particular kind of researcher to a new kind of researcher it strikes me are a lovely example of the power of thinking in a liberal education model.
Yes, absolutely. That was a big factor for me because the beginning of that course coincided with my move from the math department to what was then the liberal education program. And that brought with it a change in research. I still continued doing math research for quite a while, but gradually shifted. It brought with it a change in what I taught, which courses, but also in the way I taught very much. And I think there's several connections to liberal education. I mean, as a mathematician, I came to liberal education, I think, very much through the critical thinking pillar of liberal education. I was a later convert to the whole breadth part of it, but for math and science people, and I think academics in general, our worldview is one of critical thinking, that we analyze complex situations, we look for evidence, we apply good reasoning, we come to tentative conclusions, we communicate them, we defend them, we put them out in the world at conferences or in publications. I mean, that's a process. That's the critical thinking process. And I'm a very big believer that in fact that's the point of post-secondary, of university education, right? To learn how to think in those ways about whatever it is you're thinking about. And that was a big part of this course. And it's interesting to me now looking back that the first time I taught the course, it was pretty much a math course. It was problem solving, and it was through puzzles, and it was open to students from any area. But I think I was still 2/3 math and 1/3 other, and I hadn't really totally made that shift. But by the second time I taught the course, which was 2 years later because of a research leave.
Those moments of, I don't know what you're talking about, that turn
Yes,
into, oh, I
yes,
see, I can do
yes.
that too. Right?
Well, and it was a process for me, and I don't mean to suggest that every faculty member has to go totally into SoTL in the ways that I have. Some people kind of, you know, put their toes in and do a little bit and then retreat more to their disciplinary research. Some go back and forth. I was at a stage in my research career and my teaching career and just life in general where I was getting a little bored with the math research I was doing, and so I gradually shifted totally, and I enjoyed going deeper into it. There was a learning curve. I sometimes say it was almost like doing a second PhD because there was a huge new literature that I knew nothing about. So every time I would go to the teaching center, I would come away with 3 books and 4 articles and 5 links to things you ought to read. And that was fun and helped ground the work I was doing. When it came time to write papers, I mean, the way you write math papers is
Very
not the
different.
way you write SoTL papers, right? And it was, I learned way more about basically about social science research and about qualitative as well as quantitative research. And that was fascinating, and I think, yeah, that was a lib-ed kind of experience.
Exactly, yeah.
The other factor for me that made this a lib-ed experience in a quite different way was when you teach disciplinary-based courses, particularly upper-level ones, you know who your students are. In a third-year math course, I would already know most of the students. I would know what courses they had taken, what they knew, what they didn't, and after a few years of teaching, what they would find hard and what I would have to spend more time on. Again, it was very linear and clear-cut and easy in a way. And suddenly I was teaching not just the puzzles course, but other lib-ed courses where nobody's a lib-ed major. There's no such thing. And I would have students from a huge mix of backgrounds. So in the puzzles course, there are 40 students. I would typically have 30 different majors, 5 different faculties, some of everything. And so I didn't know them in the same way. I didn't know what backgrounds and what skills or weaknesses or approaches they would have. And I found that open-endedness a bit scary at first, but it turned out to be amazing in the context of teaching and learning problem-solving skills, because they all brought different skills to the class, right? And it was incredibly rich, and in an environment where we wanted students to work together, to teach each other, to learn together. That was amazing to see that happen, and to see not only the interaction of students from different areas, but you could also watch their respect, I think, grow for different areas. Because students also have their disciplinary snobbishness, right, and their hierarchies. And there would be weeks when, the math or computing or other science students would really do well on certain kinds of puzzles, but the next week we would do a totally different kind, and they were at a disadvantage. And it wasn't that they were overtly snobbish about it in any way, but different people would suddenly have skill sets that were valuable. And they learned, I think, to respect that kind of diversity in a group and to say, oh, you're good at this, you can help us with this part and I'll fill in here. That was really enriching for me and for them.
Well, and it strikes me that that has something to do with you would research that group differently than one that you were totally comfortable with.
Yes.
But this makes me want to come back to something you said earlier, and it's a little bit about being in your comfort zone. We come to the scholarship of teaching and learning at different stages in our career. Often typically after you've established your other research profile and you feel comfortable and safe to go exploring. But there's an argument to recognize those who want to do it early in their career, who might want to see this as as just as important as their other research career, and will they be recognized and supported? So, what do you think about what's going on at the University of Lethbridge to support the scholarship of teaching and learning, and how do we think about that in terms of the faculty, the growth of a faculty member, and across their career?
Well, I know that there is often hesitation on the part of junior people, and they have a lot of pressure on them to build a career somewhat in the traditional research ways. But I think there has been a shift at the university. I think this university's always been quite supportive of teaching. That's certainly been my experience over the long haul here. I think that there's been a shift in the last 10 or 12 years, particularly with the teaching center, which has served as a kind of gathering place to bring people together. There's always a bit of a danger in the early years that it's the same small core group of committed people. And for a long time that was true, and many of them were the more senior people. But I think the group has grown every year. When you look at our annual teaching conference, right, which started, I think, about 10 or 12 years ago, as a one-day or an afternoon event with 40 or 50 people, which we thought was great at the time, and has gradually grown. It's now a two-day event. We get well over 100, 120 or 140, I think, this year. We get amazing quality talks, and we do get more and more people every year. And I think that that's a significant sign of strength and growth. And we get a lot of newer people involved. Part of that is a shift over time in the types of hiring we do, which has its pros and cons, but we do have more instructors and whose responsibilities are much more heavily weighted towards teaching rather than research. And they are forming, I think, a great core of often more junior scholars, but they're bringing other people in their departments in too, right? And I think occasionally in some departments, if you get a couple of people in and they do interesting things and they're giving talks about it, that it will draw in some of their colleagues in ways that haven't happened before. And not everybody will become a full-time SoTL researcher, but they'll at least begin to understand and respect the kind of work that's going on.
Well, and there are discussions on campus too about, and I think it's an education project for deans and department chairs to recognize.
Very much so.
And to think about research funding for a SoTL. So I do know that there are conversations, and you're part of them.
Yes, absolutely.
To raise awareness and about SoTL, and so that it becomes part of the recognized portfolio of a faculty.
There are a couple of initiatives underway in the coming year that I think will really help with that.
Yeah. So we have done some work together, you and I. In fact, my journey into SoTL research came from our collaborations, and it was around the first year experience course.
Yes, and that was a really fascinating project that I think grew into a really interesting SoTL research project as well.
Yeah. I mean, it really does actually capture my original reluctance, because you would tell me, well, this is worthwhile, and I'd think, no. I suppose it's worthwhile to say that this comes out of a project to develop a course for first-year students aimed at introducing them to liberal education, but also the campus, resources to help them succeed. So I taught this once and then thought, well, I have other things to do. And then you took it over.
Yes, you did the pilot and set up this amazing mapping metaphor that we used to guide the course. And I was involved a little bit in a planning group, I think, and I was so impressed that that you had designed this course and made a very successful pilot, and it needed to continue. And I think you were going on leave or had other commitments the next year, so I volunteered to teach it and ended up teaching it for a couple of years in a row. And I think I was getting really gung-ho into SoTL at that point. And so we had a number of pedagogical goals for the course, and that was one of the fascinating things about that course, was we had about 10 different very tightly interwoven goals. And I was doing a survey in another course that I thought would also fit in this one, partly about students' awareness and appreciation for liberal education, but also just tracking a number of student satisfaction indices. So I suggested, well, let's include these 50 people in the course, and we did. And we actually got much more interesting data than we did in my class that I was wanting to do a comparison with. And so by the end of the second offering of the course, my first round with it, we had some really interesting data. We looked at, I think we asked them about 24 questions, and we had something like 14 or 15 that showed significant change. So all we're doing in these is tracking change in average response across the semester. But there were a number of questions or items that showed significant change, and they were things we'd been aiming at. I'm part of the university community, right? I feel comfortable on campus. I'm willing to speak with my professors. All the goals we had in mind, we put in items to track, and we found significant positive increase. And so, you know, that's the beginnings of SoTL, to say, okay, it looks like it worked. But you never really know in this kind of research, because you can't clone an identical section where you did things differently, right? We thought we had evidence, but the same one of those semesters, and I forget at the moment if it was the second year or the third year, I did the same study in my Intro to Liberal Education course, LibEd 1000, and it showed significant positive growth for understanding what LibEd is and appreciating LibEd, but it didn't for all those other indicators. So comparable first-year course, same prof, same kind of goals. The mapping course, the first-year experience course, was working, and the other one wasn't. So back to the drawing board for the other course, but now we have more significant evidence, right? So that was an amazing thing, and I used your report from the end of the first year as a model for my report, the end of the second and third year. And at that point, we began to realize, okay, we have something here, and we ended up writing a paper and talking about it at a conference. The paper's recently been accepted. So we have a joint publication, which I think is really cool about this. But the other interesting facet of that was we had hard evidence. We also were able to pull some evidence from our institutional analysis department about retention of students. The big retention issue is from first year to second year. we found increasingly in this course, in subsequent offerings of the first year experience course, the advisors were sending us students who were at risk on probation or low GPA or various issues. Our institutional analysis data showed we were actually getting higher retention rates than average. I was able to use this data in a different capacity on another committee to argue for funding, because this course is addressing retention issues, right? And we know from the literature that in general, first-year experience courses that do these 5 things that we were doing theoretically do, but we had hard practical evidence on our campus, our course, and that actually led to some funding to continue the course. So I think that's a side benefit of SoTL that I didn't expect at the beginning, that turned out to be really pragmatically useful for us. And I think this is something institutions of higher education in general should be doing. A huge part of our mandate is teaching as well as research. We are increasingly oriented towards indicators of success. We should, and we want to measure what success means in terms of outcomes for students. And this kind of research is a way to do that, right? And it's happening on some institutional levels, but it also needs to involve not only campus-wide satisfaction surveys, but looking at particularly first-year indicators of success. What's working, what isn't? And so I'm actually on a couple of committees right now that are looking at ways to bring all of this research together.
I have to say that was such an unexpected story out of that class.
Yes.
And I want to say thanks, because you believed in it early on, and I wondered what had happened there. And that's actually a great example of how SoTL research can start.
Yes.
Because I thought, it was an interesting class. I tried some things, I liked it, and it was your interest and ability to carry it forward that showed me that there's something here that was worth spending more time on.
Right.
And I think a lot of faculty members try things in classes and don't think about it then opening up this whole area of inquiry.
Yes, we try something and we think it works and we continue doing it. But for me, that next step was, how would we measure success and how could we get some data, right? I'm a data-driven person, I guess.
Well, and
although data means pretty loose things sometimes in SoTL work, but nevertheless, it's data.
Well, exactly. I mean, the other thing that I thought about when you were telling that story is our combination of different approaches to data.
Yes.
So it's been interesting as we work together on that, watching you use qualitative data more than you have in the past.
Yes, very much, yes.
And the student voice, which you have now, I see you turning to more than you might have in the past.
Yes, absolutely.
As a way to understand what's going on. That's been,
so the data
fun.
For me is a starting point, as I think it is for much SoTL research. Okay, we got some qualitative or quantitative data, we can make some graphs and pictures, and that's cool. But the deeper levels are, how do we get the students to tell us what's going on, and how do we mine that and analyze that and use that? And certainly I've learned from you as an anthropologist, that's what you do, right? And you've taught me a large part of what I know about that, and you've done that. So that's another project to talk about, is what you've done in your intro anthropology course, which just absolutely blows me away, to introduce group work into a 300-person classroom and make it work, and not only that, interweave it with anthropological and ethnographic research work at the same time. So I think that's an incredibly layered and rich SoTL project that you're doing.
I think that's when I officially began doing SoTL research. And
in a committed kind of way, not...
Exactly.
And
it came out of our collaboration so that I could do the things I saw you doing, which was, thinking before you go into the classroom, what can I do here and how will I measure it? And I, much as with your problem solving, first time out, I wasn't sure what I was trying to do. And so perhaps it's worthwhile to stop for a minute. So this is a 300-seat classroom, fixed seat lecture style, intro class. And because of my interest in first-year experience courses and what we've done, I was interested in seeing how we could get students in that larger classroom to develop cohorts. Now this was in tandem with the Faculty of Arts and Science cohort program. And so I knew I had students that were part of this smaller cohort experience in this large classroom. And so my question became, how can I give that experience to everyone? And so I found and started to learn about team-based learning, which is an entire approach based on breaking down your approach to include more group work based on them working together to expand their learning. And so I tried this out, and it was terrifying, and I did it early on.
Well, these innovative projects always are, right? They're scary because you're giving up control.
And that was a big part of it. So if you're running a lecture-based classroom, I know when I start, I know when I end, I know what I'm covering. And this, when you give that much control over to the students and what they do in your groups, you really do give something up. And my first try was absolutely with the safety net of the teaching center. Jeff Meadows was my wingman, and I had TAs. But then the second time, it really did turn into, this is why I now think of myself as a SoTL researcher. The second time out, we actually had undergraduate students in the classroom working as ethnographers alongside these groups, because the first time out, we thought, as I say, from the front of the room, I could see that I thought things were working, but I can't be inside 36 groups to see if they're effective or not. And so by using students to use the skills of an anthropologist inside an introductory anthropology class, I not only got to model that method, but I got to use that method in my own research to see what was going on. And we're still working on that. We're still starting the first write-ups of that. But if I can just add a couple of other things. What was wonderful is we also saw students doing applied studies, exploring it further. And so this sort of amplifier effect of that were huge.
And I think it's brilliant that you could do this in an anthropology course and bring in the students to be practicing anthropologists. And that's just so rich. But also the kinds of feedback loops then with teaching, with research, with independent studies, with using senior students as mentors for junior students, with giving senior students the research opportunities and the course or job opportunities. And there's just so many things that are all linked together in this incredible package, right?
And one of the things I love about team-based learning is what happens effectively is students become teachers of one another. And co-teachers, co-instructors. But then, as you point out, and this is something that happens in Lib Ed, and we don't often talk about it, it's the tutors and the student leaders have this amazing experience.
They do.
And it changes their careers and their choices ultimately.
It gives them teaching and group leadership and research experiences that most students don't get till grad school, if ever. Certainly not usually third or fourth year undergrads.
Exactly.
And it enriches their university experience. So more and more I bring in student researchers into these projects, be a TA in the course, and then be a research assistant to code the data. And then they end up being co-authors on papers. And again, it's a kind of feedback loop that really works for everyone. Right?
And this is one of the things I've often said, that the University of Lethbridge actually has provided that kind of really excellent opportunity for students to have these kinds of enriching experiences at the undergraduate level, and that requires a little of attention. It makes
but it's something we've done well for a
very
long
long time. We should notice.
And we still do, right? And in the early days, I think it came about a little bit by happenstance, and when we didn't have a graduate program yet, if you needed research assistants, you had to get undergrads.
Right.
But we also consciously put money into summer scholarships, summer research job money for students, and I early on didn't do that, and the first time I had a student, I was so floored by what this student managed to accomplish in a summer and how amazing it was, especially for her, but also for me, that now I do it all the time. And it's a kind of, often for me now, it's a kind of combination of research and teaching and SoTL work that the students do. And so it's a great experience for them.
And I mean, to loop back to something we said earlier, we write our professional activities report, pardon me, at the end of the year. How do we claim this? Yeah. It is teaching, it is research, and it is service.
It's service, exactly. It's all of those, right?
Combined.
And those lines are not as clear cut when you do this kind of work.
Exactly.
But you know, I think another interesting thread here is there's increasing attention in most disciplines on the research front to multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary research, right? Emphasis for funding opportunities and so on. The hot thing is cross-disciplinary research. We need that in our teaching. Right. And I think SoTL is a way that we can do that. LibEd is certainly a way, and I've taught with other people. But to co-author a paper with a colleague and friend from Anthropology, to me, is a really unique experience. And how often do you get that kind of thing, right? I mean, and the learning of each other's disciplines and approaches and thinking, that's an incredibly enriching experience in and of itself. I mean, when we wrote the paper on the first year experience, we sent drafts back and forth and back and forth. And I learned so much from you about the writing of that paper and the honing of ideas in really great ways. And it became a way better paper than I would have written on my own, and I hope vice versa for you, right? The joint effort was amazing.
I think it also tied into our personalities, because as you said, you're linear and organized.
Yes.
These are not descriptions for me. And that backing and forthing and seeing how, I think this opens up things for me, for any faculty member otherwise. Now when you sit on a committee with a different kind of research, you say, oh, I understand a little bit how that research works. It doesn't work the way mine does. And I value and respect it. Even though it's not, it doesn't function the way I do. If we could, one more thing I thought might be worthwhile talking about, and this is about writing with other people and outside your discipline. You told me a story recently about an article you'd written and the impact it's had. And what you found out about the impact it's had. This is SoTL research.
Well, I was commenting to you one day, I think, that, you know, we all get all these measures now, ResearchGate and Google Scholar and so on, that tracks, you know, how many people have read your paper every week or month or year, and how many citations. And, you know, I worked in a very narrow, esoteric area of math, and if my paper got 5 reads in a year, wow, I was, you know, a star. And a couple of the SoTL papers I've done get way more reads and way more citation and way more impact than anything I've ever done in math. Probably everything I did in math put together, right? And to me, that was astounding. One paper on teaching quantitative skills, and the paper on interactive and group work in problem solving have over 1,000 reads each, and nothing I've ever written anywhere else ever reached, like, you know, 50. So this was startling to me, but it also made me think, wow, I can actually have more impact here than I ever did in math. Not that that was a big factor for me or an inducement in the kind of work I did. I did it, you know, it was a small subfield of an area in math, in pure math, and I never cared if it was useful for anything. I just liked the mental exercise and the abstractness of it, but it's a different world.
Well, I think that's just actually a really important conversation inside of academia right now. This is not to diminish your, let's just say, illustrious career as a math scholar, recognized repeatedly over a long career, very well published, and acknowledged as being a leader, right? But then when we move into these other realms, the impact looks different, and so I think that's for us to think about. The possibilities of contributions in different ways.
In different ways.
And what that can mean.
And partly it's, you know, the impact factors are different in every discipline, and the pace of publication and all those things. So this may be more to do with the disciplinary stuff than anything. But it was an interesting realization for me that, people are actually reading this.
Might be more than one kind of impact we should think about.
Yes. Well, and your goals, I think, as a researcher and teacher are different at different stages of your career. And as you get older, maybe you care a little more about impact and teaching. Teaching's important, and to me, access is important, and that's another sort of lib-ed facet, I think, that brought me from math into lib-ed. Is math in particular has, for decades, if not longer, been used as a filter for many careers. And so it's an access issue, and it was often an access issue for women, right? Girls were weeded out of math courses early on for various societal reasons, and then they would end up finding all these various career doors closed to them, and so I became interested in those issues and in teaching quantitative skills to non-math people as an equity and access kind of issue.
Well, and
That's
the SoTL
important
research,
too. And SoTL research for me is part of that.
Well, and I think it also, and it just actually ties into what you just said, the impact of what we do in our classrooms is not always apparent. SoTL research helps you know that students are impacted in different ways and quite subtly.
Yes. So here's a story. The first time that I taught the puzzles course, problem solving course, back in 2010, there was a student in the class who was a math ed major, and I hired him the summer after as a research assistant, and he went through all the data and coded it for us and made graphs and stuff, and ended up being a co-author with Doug from the Teaching Center and with me on a paper. One of our first papers, here's our first data, right? We were so excited, we had data. And then he went away, and I'd heard that he got a temporary teaching job, teaching math and physics in a high school, and then he had another temporary year, and then we kind of lost touch. 2 weeks ago at convocation, 8 o'clock on a Friday morning, I'm in my office getting ready to go to convocation, and this student turned up at my door saying, I was so hoping you would be here this early. His wife was graduating that morning, and it turned out he'd, meanwhile, gotten a permanent job at this school and gotten married and bought a house, and life was wonderful. But he told me last year he got a chance to do an extra course, and he did a version of the puzzles course
that's marvelous.
With his grade 11 and 12s in this rural high school. And it was amazing. And he had all these ideas about it. And I told him about all the research we've done since then, and a project with teachers, and he's now all excited about doing this with teachers. And so he wants to do a master's, and a colleague from Faculty of Ed that I've worked with on a follow-up of the puzzles course, she and I are probably at some stage going to end up co-supervising him
that's marvelous.
To do a project on this with either high school students or teachers. So you don't know the impact, right? You do this with a group of students, some of whom are going to be teachers, and then 8 years later you find out that he's carrying on this work in this school board in rural Alberta somewhere. I don't even know where this place is. So, you know, to me, that was just such a cool moment
Sort of, and
to realize
back to the
impact.
amplifier effects
Yes,
that we can't predict.
exactly, right.
And you remind me, one of the things we've both done is published with undergraduate students.
Yes.
And that's, you know, we've been able to do
that's
that here at the U of L. And,
Yes,
and,
yes.
and those are not necessarily students who are going to become teachers, but they they use the research
yes,
experience in all kinds of different
absolutely.
ways.
Yes. And this fellow had a publication with us. Maybe even helped him get a permanent job. I don't know,
You don't
but
know?
certainly helped the richness of his teaching. And I've had a number of students that are co-authors in SoTL work now.
Yeah, I have sociology and anthropology students who, you know, have worked with me, and they use this as a platform then to think about graduate school.
They do,
Yeah.
and it helps them in terms of getting scholarships, but also just having a student observer in the classroom. The second or third year, I had a student TA who helped in the classroom, but also we explicitly asked her, we were at that deepening stage of the research when we wanted, I was busy teaching and Doug was busy helping me teach, and it was nice having an extra pair of hands to hand out things and answer questions. But some days to just sit in the back and observe and take notes, because we were starting to see bits of patterns, but we didn't have the time to focus. And she helped solidify several patterns that we ended up writing, I think, the best SoTL work we've done on this project.
Well,
and she's a co-author on those.
That was one of the great strengths of the team-based learning. Our ethnographers, they told us things because they were inside, and also they're close in age. And most of them had taken the class, and so they were seeing it with different eyes. It was
and they
terrific.
give you different feedback than
Well, thank you, Dean Wismath, for a wonderful conversation. It's one of many we've had.
Yes.
And my interest in SoTL research is due to you, so thank you very much for that and for today.
Thank you.